Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, he, him.
I am AndresPlays, he, him as well.
And this is Tales from the Backlog, where each week I am joined by a guest to deep dive a game from our backlogs. Today's game is Sword of the Sea, but before we get into that, a few quick things. If this is your first time here, first of all, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate you checking out the show. Here's how spoilers work. We're not going to spoil the story. We're not going to spoil, well, let's say, big moments within the game. As per usual, there's a timestamp down in the show notes for when spoilers begin, and until that point, you're safe. Listen away. And if you like what you hear or what you see, please consider supporting however you can. You can do so monetarily on Patreon, patreon.com/realdavejackson. You can also tell friends, leave ratings and reviews wherever you're listening or watching. You can share the episode in Discord servers and things. All of those are really helpful to help people find the show. As you heard at the top of the show, I have a guest with me today. AndresPlays is here with me. You may know him from Twitch, from social media. He's also a games critic and hosts the Little Victories podcast. First time on the show. Welcome, welcome.
That is correct. Thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a big fan of the show. I have listened to many of your podcasts, not all of them yet, but you have had great guests. The curation, the vibe, and the structure of the podcast itself is something that I really, really enjoy. You know, when I'm, grinding in games, you just like while I'm working, I put it on the background and I really enjoy those conversations. So I'm glad to be a part of them now.
Of course, yeah. I'm glad to add you to the stable of guests. We have an interesting game, one that you brought one that you helped me push up the list, we'll say. We're doing Sword of the Sea today. It is an adventure game developed and published by Giant Squid for PC and PS5 in 2025. The director of the game is Matt Nava, and we'll have some more credits as we go through the rest of the episode. If you don't know what Sword of the Sea is, we have some quick pitches per usual. I take the easy pitch per usual. It is the host's privilege. It is Journey plus Abzu plus sand surfing. Andres, what would you say?
That is correct. Oh God, it's as a games critic, as you mentioned, I have specialized myself in covering off the beaten path indie games. So I would definitely say this is an atmospheric, as you said. I forgot the name of because you said sand surfing, but it's actually more of this Tony Hawk. I think that I was streaming the game when it came out, and I think that in the chat and in my conversation with the friends that I was showing it to, that was the first thing that came to our minds. It was a Tony Hawk-esque kind of game with
Tony
an
Hawk
indie
in the
twist
desert.
to it.
Yeah, with an indie twist. Yeah. We'll talk about the introduction of like skateboarding, sand surfing, things like that into this kind of game. I played this on PS5. It took me 2.5 hours to beat the game. It does have a new game plus. I didn't do it, but it is there, and it's I think it's encouraged more so than a lot of other games. So where did you play this? How long was your playthrough?
I played it on PS5, and as you said, it's very fitting that we're talking about it today because it's the Tales from the Backlog. And I played it the day it came out on PS5 Pro. It was August 19, 2025. I streamed it on Tuesdays as the time I stream. And I played that for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But because I was just so enthralled with the surfing and the waves, I didn't really lock in, let's say, with the main story. I was just wandering around, I would say. So in the end, I picked the game back up to have this conversation. And my final playthrough was 4.5 hours, but I could definitely, could have cut down to 3 easily.
Yeah. So it's not the longest game, but there is opportunity to spend more time in there for sure. Especially if you want to be completionist or if you just really like zooming around in the desert, you can spend some time doing that. So you said you were on this on launch day. What put it on your radar to be there right away? Did you play Journey, Abzu, the Pathless? I think the Pathless is the one. I always get the Pathless and Solar Ash mixed up. It's the Pathless, right?
The Pathless is the one from Giant Squid, indeed.
Right. So did you play those? Is that what put it on your radar for like a day one play?
I think it's quite an interesting topic because of course, I played Journey. I think it was one of those first games, more than 10 years ago that really mm, gave me the idea that video games could be something more, that they could be atmospheric, that they could be unique, that they could be not strictly like a run and gun shooter, gameplay heavy type of experience. It could be narrative, it could be meditative, let's say. So, I was aware of that, but I did not really like Absu that much.
Mm,
But the fact that I saw sort of the sea on a state of play a couple of months back, and it was also releasing right on the PS Plus subscription service. So, I had it uh, for free, right?
right.
Quote unquote. So I said, well, why not, showcase it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right on. Yeah. So I played Journey many years ago. It's been a while now since that game came out. And so that was my introduction. Of course, Matt Nava was the art director on Journey. And so carrying that kind of, I don't want to say like art first, but definitely art forward type of game with the games that Giant Squid's done. So I played Journey. I really loved that game. I loved Abzu a lot too. I found that to just be like a very relaxing, pleasant game to play. Haven't played the
Hmm.
Pathless. That's just a casualty of there being so many games. It's been on my wish list for forever. Just haven't bought it, haven't played it. But sort of the sea, kind of like you when I saw it was released, and especially when I saw who did it, and you see the clips of like, okay, it's this thing that it looks familiar, but we've introduced this like sand to surfing type of thing. So like movement is going to be a bigger part of this game. The art, the music has always been an impressive thing about these, but now we're adding in a little bit more movement to be very reductive, a little bit more gameplay to it. So
Hmm.
it always, right on my radar. And then, like you said, drops on PS Plus. So it's an easy one to just be like, all right, well, it's probably not going to be the longest game. We
Hmm.
will we'll try to get it on, try and find a place to play it. And I remember I talked to you about a couple of games that were on my radar to play, and this was the one that you wanted to do for the show. So that helped me bump it up the list. And I enjoyed this, and it's I'm a bit conflicted because like I think that the things that are added onto the established formula that the giant squid games, at least the ones that I play,
Hmm.
had kind of established, I don't think the additions are additive for me. Specifically, like we have the sand surfing type of thing added onto the audio visual experience. I think the audio visual experience is as good as it's ever been. The game is beautiful. The music is fantastic. The kind of emotional journey that you can go on just taking in the art, looking at what's on screen, and listening to the music is really good. But I don't think that the surfing aspects are very good. I don't think that they're additive. And I think that they, like, I'll just say, at its best is when you're just going full speed, maybe doing some simple jumps and double jumps and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
when you really get into that zone of I'm moving fast, I'm zooming through the desert, the music is beautiful, the art is beautiful. What an experience. Fucking video games, they're cool. I love it. And then when it's like time to do tricks to get a high score, I don't think that's very good at all. And
Hmm.
it's time to solve the same puzzle that you've solved 45 times already. Like I just don't think that that stuff ends up being additive to it. I think that
Hmm.
we could have just kept the speed aspect of it and not added in trying to do tricks, and I think the game would have been better for that. So like for me it topped out as like a pleasant audio visual experience, but I get drawn out of it anytime the game asks me to do anything above that, which I don't think is good for this kind of game. So like I like it. I could have loved it and I didn't. It's the
Hmm.
first one of these games that I've mentioned, Journey, Abzu, and now Sword of the Sea, that I didn't
Hmm.
love. I thought this is like it's pretty good.
Right. Well, that is a very interesting way to start the conversation because I don't know how to feel about this game. I suppose, and I don't really like being this reductive about games with scores, right? Because I recently just reviewed a game called Dreams of Another, which is basically a very strange game where you go through like different sort of vignettes of dreams. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very abstract. And a lot of people really hated it for it because there was, not a lot of gameplay. It was just very introspective. And in sort of the C's case, I think that there is a story that we'll talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the gameplay, and there's of course the visuals and the music, which I think that really try their best to take your breath away. I was going to mention this a little bit later, but I think that something that the game does really, really well is this sort of, and I wrote it down here, is this the From Software revelation. I think that they got that nailed
Okay.
down to a T, which is when you're about to enter a new area, the doors slowly open and it's all
Oh,
white,
right.
and then you see
Mm-hmm.
the beautiful landscape just
Yes.
looking, just being enticing. Like you can explore all of this, and you see that in Elden Ring and the Dark Souls games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this game does that a lot. There's some moments where it really tries to be cool, where the camera slows down, where it's really, as you said, video games, man. Like it's like it knows that it kind of wants to, like it wants to, have its cake and eat it too, right? Because it's introspective, but it also wants to be cool at it. When you're jumping, you like at the start of the
Yeah.
game, you jump and you do these tricks, and I'm like, well, that's it's kind of strange for a game that's supposed to make me like feel emotional things, right? Like it's
You're right.
it's
There's a weird contrast there between like a meditative experience, but also like I just did a 980, or a 900 trick or something like that.
right. And yeah, and going back, that it's that contrast, right? Because I've never played Tony Hawk. I recently downloaded the Skate early access demo,
Mm-hmm.
and I just played that for like about 5 to 10 minutes, and then it just hit me like, I don't like these games. I don't know why I'm playing it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a games critic, as you mentioned, so I usually do try to try everything at least once. But I'm not too much into sports, or any kind of
Mm-hmm.
games of this style. But I think that Sword of the Sea does is just like a light version of it. So I think that it's
Yeah.
approachable in that sense, to its detriment as well, because I have talked with people, with friends, that did not really like that it was so minimalistic.
Mm. Okay. I guess like a little bit of prior knowledge helps with stuff like that because that's kind of what this studio does. They do
Hmm.
minimalistic type stuff, especially within like what you, the player, are asked to do as like a character moving through the world. You're not asked to do a whole lot in these games. And
Hmm.
I think that, if you played Journey and Abzu, and I don't know about the Pathless, but maybe that game too, you would come into this expecting that same sort of thing. Although, like, you are surf skating. I'm gonna have to settle on a verb at some point in this. You are surfing around and like doing tricks and double jumps and like flipping the board around and stuff like that. So it looks a lot more involved than I think it actually is.
Hmm.
Even though this is more involved than stuff I've played from them in the past. So, yeah, we've got a lot of conversation threads open. Let's hold on. Let's
Hmm.
introduce the game after this music break. We'll listen to a bit of music. We'll come back. We'll set up what you're doing, and then we'll dive in. So, in Sword of the Sea, it begins with this opening cutscene. It shows this dark room in a cave with these identical statues holding swords. A single droplet of water falls from the ceiling below onto, or from the ceiling above, onto a statue, which reanimates it. And this is what you play as, this reanimated character. Its eyes glow blue, a blue flame appears around its head. It pulls out the sword, swings it around a few times, and then hops on top of it. That's the primary way of using the sword, is not as a weapon, but as a board. So you take off out into the desert. You travel through the different areas of the game, desert, an ice area, lava area, and you're kind of reintroducing water and life back into it. So that might be a theme that we can put a pin in for the spoiler discussion. But this brings us into, I think, right away, the thing that jumps out the most about these games, and especially this one, is you're going through kind of a dead world, a desert world, an icy world, and you're reintroducing water, you're reintroducing plants and life back into it. And you have a bunch of, outstanding visuals that come along with that. So real quick, two primary people credited at the top. Of course, they're not the only people that worked on this, but 3D artist Bryce Warner and environmental artist Natalie Spitzel. Want to shout them out because this is a beautiful game. It really jumps off in trailers, but especially as you're moving through it. And, you do the thing to unlock the water, the plants grow back, it's marine life specifically that comes back to it. It just looks incredible.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that going back to Abzu, I was listening to a conversation that Matt Nava had, and they wanted to hone in on this kind of new gameplay, which was a kinetic movement, right? Like a flow state kind of movement that the game hones in on and is really good at showcasing. But yes, I do think it's great in that regard. It really does nail that feeling. And going back to the beginning, you said this reanimated statue before you are let free into the waves of the sea. And the way the game moves also should be mentioned, that it's just wavy, right? It's not a static desert. It's wavy. So I think that also kind of helps with the vibrancy of the game itself. And there's there's a very minimal interaction with the world, but there's like pots out there that you can kind of like break and get some currency that will be used later on in the game. But it's just a really small set of things that you can do at the beginning of the game. But I think that because the game is so short itself, I think that really kind of helps the game not overstay its welcome. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, I think that all of these games, one of the benefits of them is that none of them really outstay their welcome. Sword of the Sea specifically, like it doesn't give you a whole lot of like stuff to do. Like you said, you go around, there's a couple types of things. One where you gotta like surf over these kind of lanterns to light them all up to inspire some kind of change in the environment. There's one where there's a big crack like in the ground, you stab your sword into it, water comes out, you bring life back. There's a couple other types of things. Really what I think they're trying to do is set up this like, the zones are bigger than the previous games, except maybe Journey, but you're moving through them a lot faster. And so what I really think they're trying to do is set up a kind of flow state in a lot of cases where you're just kind of zooming through these levels, whether you're just moving on the board or there's these giant chains that you kind of grind along at certain points. The music is going, you're looking around the environment, especially once you've reintroduced the water, and like with the water comes life and color back into it. And they're really trying to set up these moments, I think, where you're in that kind of flow state, moving, taking in the music, looking around, because it is a really pretty game. It's not like it's not a photorealistic thing. It's definitely very stylized, but it's pretty. It's really colorful. One of the things that's interesting is like, we said you're in the desert, but you reintroduce marine life. So like, it's like underwater plants, and schools of fish will travel kind of along the critical path where you're supposed to go. A school of fish will be moving in that direction too. Or maybe you'll let, dolphins or sharks or whales or some other kind of sea life out. You're not filling the world with water. You're releasing water
Mm-hmm.
And these things are kind of swimming in the air through these environments. Do not ask why these fish can swim through the desert air, but they are. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
like some kind of rivers and stuff that you unlock as well. But coming down to like the visual presentation goes hand in hand with like the speed of it, I think, as you're kind of, if you choose to surf down these rivers or any other way. And especially, I think this game works the best when you're moving quickly, just
Mm-hmm.
moving. You can jump, you can do a double jump. Your dude will like jump up and he'll like flip the board around when you do the double jump. It looks cool. The animations are really nice. I think it works the best when you're just doing that, moving quickly and doing the simple jumps. That doesn't break up that kind of flow state, I think. It's when you get more involved is when I start to like struggle with controls, which is not something I ever thought would be a part of this
Mm-hmm.
game. For as little as they ask of you, I felt like it was a little bit too clunky to do everything that they ever asked me to do.
Yeah, I think that first of all, like that is a very interesting thing to say, because you go back to like the platforming, and there's several collectibles and hidden
Yeah.
items and characters in the world that you can go and try to find, but I don't think like that's maybe for the completionist, but I think that as the experience itself, it's really to its detriment. I didn't really find all that there was to find in the in you know
Yeah.
in each level, because you have the platforming. Once I said as I said a moment ago, there's like chests scattered all over the world. They're all
Mm-hmm.
shiny, and you have to find like the ways to get there through columns, or like the algae that sort of props up when once you bring water back to life to the environment,
Mm-hmm.
that like the algae kind of like helps you float all the way up there, which is interesting, but it's of course compared to that feeling of rushing through the desert or through the sea itself,
Mm-hmm.
is unmatched, right? Like it's more of a, okay, I'm just gonna do this really quickly to get back to the fun part, I think.
It's like, it kind of reminds me of like, have you ever played like a 3D Sonic game where it's like it feels kind of fun to run really fast, but like when you're
Uh-huh.
when you're asked to slow down and do like more precision platforming type things, I think it feels pretty bad. That's how I feel about Sword of the Sea. Like there's some parts in that ice level where you have to like platform up the back of these statues, and it feels bad. Like to
Mm.
move
Mm-hmm.
like at low speeds, the movement system is too slippery to feel like you can do anything with precision. Luckily, when you're moving at high speed, like say you're at high speed and you're trying to like jump up on one of those chains to grind, you have a huge margin for error. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not difficult to do that. But anytime the game asked me to like slow down and do something with precision, I thought it felt pretty bad. The other part of this that I thought felt rough, if we're getting criticism out of the way, um, is because you're on this board, there is a trick system, and you collect these little like pyramid like chits around the world. You can turn them into an NPC to learn new tricks. And this is something that like I think gets expanded if you do New Game Plus. You learn more and more tricks. I got like a couple of upgrades, one that taught me grab tricks and one that taught me spin tricks. So there's a couple points where there are like score attack challenges to get more
Mm-hmm.
currency and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of like half pipes in different
Mm-hmm.
parts of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that doing the tricks feels bad. There's like one, it feels like there's one input too many. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's Tony Hawk muscle memory for me, where it's
Yeah.
like, no, I just turn the stick to rotate and I press the button once to grab, it should rotate and grab. And there's like one extra input in this game that
Mm-hmm.
makes it feel like I'm always starting the trick too late in the jump,
Oh
if
yeah.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
the input doesn't is not as snappy as how it should be, as how it should feel. I
Yeah.
think that, going back to your point, and I think that they really should have hopefully well, not any longer, but I think they should have tweaked that, because at the beginning of the game, right, in the first starting area, there, you bring life back
Mm-hmm.
to this sort of I don't know, this mausoleum or something, and there's like there's like a skateball where you can do tricks and stuff,
Yeah.
which is kind of fun. But then there is, as you said, there's challenges, and that didn't really feel good at all in that first skate park, so to speak. The challenge didn't feel good because you find out that if you do several tricks and you pull them off in sequence, you get higher score and it multiplies. And
Right.
that's where the gamey aspect of the game kind of wants to let you do some of the other stuff beyond the narrative and the awe-inspiring elements of the landscapes, which I
Yeah.
think they do kind of fall flat. And I'm sad to say, because I love indie games. Whoever listens to me and has read my reviews, I love indie games, and I take no joy in criticizing them. But I do think that they feel like tacked in. I feel like I did try and I pulled it off. It's not that difficult, actually, like to get a good score and to get, like, I think you
Yeah.
get some little reward for it, right, for doing each one of the challenges. But the
Mm-hmm.
challenges in the later levels feel easier to do and more rewarding. So if in the first one you
Mm.
had a bad experience, you will be discouraged to go and do
Yeah.
it in the later ones.
So I never found the later ones. I just found the first one. Or maybe I didn't activate them. I'm not sure. Kind of related to that, when you have the half pipes or like the pools, for
Hmm.
example, where you're supposed to go down and go up and do the tricks and come down, and you're supposed to
Yeah,
build up this speed, and
momentum. Yeah.
yeah, build the momentum. That's why this feels bad to me, is there's no momentum unless you continue to hold forward on the stick. Your
Hmm.
character does not maintain momentum by itself. And this feels bad to me because when you come down, if you hold the button as you go up the other side, you will exit the half pipe or exit the pool. And so there was a lot of times I jumped in and I was like, hell yeah, half pipe time. And it was really hard to just like have a sustained run of jumps and come down and go up and do another trick and come down and build this speed and momentum. And it just really discouraged me from really ever doing it.
Hmm.
And there's a side of me that is like, this also doesn't feel like thematically interesting within this game, within its story. But there's the other part of me that's like, well, fuck that. Like, just have fun doing some tricks. But I don't think it feels good to do the tricks. So
Hmm.
I stopped. From that point on, the only tricks I ever did were the simple double jump, flippies and some spins, because
Hmm.
those were easy to pull off, and I didn't need a score anyway. The game gives you a score for your playthrough, by the way.
Hmm.
At the
Hmm.
end, you'll get a results screen with a score if you want to compare. It doesn't interest me at all, really. So
Hmm.
this is an interesting thing, right? Like, I think that these games and a lot of indie games in general that are, quote, gameplay light will get criticized for not being involved enough. I think that this has largely gone away, but once upon a time, there was a criticism of walking sims as like, all you do is walk. Where's the gameplay? This is a game. It should be gamey. And I don't
Hmm.
believe that at all. And I think that this game, Sword of the Sea, is a pretty textbook example of like, more involved gameplay mechanics do not always make a game better and don't always make a game more engaging. I think this game would have been better without the half pipes and without the more involved trick system. And just
Hmm.
zooming through the desert, I think would have made this a more cohesive and certainly a less frustrating experience. I don't mean
Right.
frustrating in the way that like, oh, I need to do this and I can't and I'm stuck here type of way. Just
Uh-huh.
like, this doesn't feel like the type of game where I should ever be brought out of the moment because like I can't get the character to do what I want them to do. This doesn't feel like the kind of game that should bring up friction like that. And it
Mm.
does. So I think that, again, more involved gameplay actually subtracts from the overall experience of Sword of the Sea.
Hmm. Yes, Definitely, and it goes back to what you mentioned about Sonic, because it happened to me in Sword of the Sea. I replayed it recently again in preparation for the podcast, and
Hmm.
I really disliked where, just like in Sonic, you hit an obstacle, or there's something else that you can do. You mentioned that you didn't find the rest of the challenges. I did, because it's I kind of wanted to get the whole experience, so to speak. And the whole
Hmm.
experience, as you said, is sort of lacking if you just go through the main path, and are in constant awe of the landscapes and everything, then it'll be a good time. But this really subtracts, even if you just stumble upon it by mistake, because as with any good curious gamer, you see something, on the horizon, and you're like, well, I want to go there, I want to see what's in there for me.
Hmm.
Maybe something cool is there, and then you find it's another challenge park, and you're like, I just wasted my time. Because that is how I felt in Sort of the Sea. I
Yeah.
still did it, but it wasn't as rewarding, or
Yeah.
as fun, I feel.
This is a like, it's a less involved part of the game, but I also think that the kind of like puzzles that you do are not very rewarding,
Mm,
especially after a certain point. Once you realize there's like three types of things that you do, in order to like release the water, or like you'll come across a gate with four locks and you gotta
mm,
release the four locks in order to open the gate. How do you release the four locks? Well, you go somewhere, you see a bunch of lanterns on the ground, you surf over them to light them all up, and
mhm.
you do that like 70 times in the game. Like you just do it so many times. It's
Yeah.
I think that like the thesis for why I think Sword of the Sea is good but not great is
Mhm.
because adding more gameplay, more quote mechanics, doesn't always make a game better. Like, I disagree with the criticism out there of gameplay light games that they need
Mhm.
more involved gameplay mechanics.
Mhm.
Whatever is right for your game is right for your game, no matter how involved it is. If it's just gone home, walking around and opening drawers and reading notes, that's what's right for that game. And I felt similarly about like Abzu, for example. I don't need more gameplay mechanics in that game. And in a game that's supposed to be about taking in the art and the music, and kind of maybe thinking about the story, theorizing about how do these lore pieces connect together? What are they trying to say in this type of story? I don't
Mhm.
I don't want repetitive puzzles, or the fact that I can't go up and down a half pipe 5 times in a row to distract me from the good part, the
Mhm.
reason I'm here. And I think that that does happen. So like, I don't want people to come out of this thinking like it's a disaster to play.
Right.
Like we said at the beginning, when you're just zooming through the levels, which is a lot of what you're doing, to be fair,
Mhm.
it feels nice. It feels nice to be going fast, and then you get all the beautiful art and music that plays into that feeling. But
Mhm.
it's basically like anytime they ask you to do something else, I start to get that thing that's pulling at me, that's pulling
Mhm.
me out of the experience a little bit, to just be like, why won't this fucking guy stay in the half pipe? Stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it happens too many times in a game that's 2.5 hours long.
Yes, I agree. And, just to be a little more positive for a moment, I wanted to
Sure.
mention that I was listening to Matt Nava talk about the game, right? He went on like the podcast circuit, and I something that I really loved and that I really resonated with it. And if you let me, I just want to tell a brief
Of
personal
course.
story. He mentioned that he wanted to recreate the feeling of how snowboarding feels.
Hmm.
And once, I had already played the game, and once he said that, it kind of clicked with me. Beyond what we criticized about, like the challenges and whatnot, I do think that once I was as exchange student in Canada many years ago, and I was skiing for the first time with my friends. We went over to the chairlift to like the highest part of the mountain, right, with the black
Hmm.
flag and everything. And of course, I fell a few times, but that feeling, that exhilarating feeling of adrenaline,
Hmm.
reaching a speed that you couldn't as a person, right, running or whatever, but like sliding down a hill, feeling the wind in your face. I think that that feeling really is second to none. And if you look at the game from that perspective, I do think that um, maybe they didn't achieve it, to its highest degree, but they, you can really feel the intention of it, right?
Yeah. No, that feeling is a success when that's what the game is asking you to do. 100%. Like, I agree with you. I've been skiing one time. I got that feeling. I did not crash, and I've never been skiing again because I'm just like, I know my body. I can't take a fall at high speeds on skis anymore. So I haven't done it, but I did get
Mhm.
the feeling. I know what you mean, and I think that they capture it. I just think they ask you to do other things too often that subtract from that feeling. I
Mhm.
honestly think that this game could have been made up of mostly that, and it would have
Mhm.
been better, because that is good. As you're going, I don't want to go too far into the show without mentioning, you get Austin Wintory's soundtrack going through the game too. So let's introduce that vocal heavy soundtrack. And the thing that jumped out to me was kind of like a unique quality to the voices. And I'm glad I paid attention during the credits, because the reason it sounds different is it's a boys choir. It's not, it's
Mhm.
high voices. It's not a female choir. It's a boys choir, which gives it that slightly different kind of tone to it. And you mentioned like we're going through like a mausoleum in the first area. It's a desert. You're going through like what looks to be like temple structures, and abandoned city, stuff like that. And the soundtrack really helps to give it this like ancient feeling. These boys choirs singing in what sounds like a made up language to me.
Mhm.
Maybe they're singing Latin. I don't know, but it certainly sounds like it's not English. Okay, so we'll
Mhm.
just say that. So it gives it this like mystery, this age. Almost like a reverence to everything around you. You're in what maybe once was a sacred place, like that kind of feeling, and it's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I it's an interesting topic that you mentioned there, because I wrote this down. I think that there is a lot of spirituality involved in the game. I think
Yeah.
that that's what the game is trying, to make you feel. You look at some stained glass windows in some areas, and they look just like, a Catholic church.
Hmm.
And some of the themes as well that, we'll talk about, after the spoiler break. And especially the music, which is beautiful. I do think Austin Wintory is really flexing his muscles. I believe he mentioned he wanted to stray away from pianos, because there are other composers that have that nailed down. But eventually I believe he did a great job at it. They've collaborated for many years now,
Hmm.
and it really shows. I think that, going to that the good side, let's say, of the game that we've been discussing,
Yeah.
uh I think that, again, the camera pulling back, and then the soundtrack just going full speed ahead with the alongside the gameplay. I think that's a magical feeling that they nailed.
Yeah. And that's like the primary thing that I think people will come to a giant squid game for now, is like that feeling of being in this interesting place with beautiful art and beautiful music. And whatever you're doing as a character doesn't need to be that involved, because you are first and foremost inhabiting this moving piece of art, basically, right? Like
Mm.
that's what I think like Journey felt like in the early stages of that game, and that's basically all of what Abzu is. And then Journey packs like a real emotional punch, and at the end, especially once you figure out what's going on in that game, Abzu, I think the ocean is cool. Matt Nava, by the way, very
Hmm.
obviously fucking loves the ocean. And I agree, dude. The ocean is awesome. It's just like
Yeah.
we're back with the ocean stuff. And there's just like a majesty to the ocean that like Abzu brought some emotion to me just based on that. And it was one of my like bigger criticisms of Sword of the Sea is I didn't get the emotional punch in this
Mm.
game. I wonder if they were trying, because this game has a much more straightforward like plot than the previous ones that I've played. There are characters in this game. There are moments where things happen to characters in a more traditional way than in previous games of theirs that I've played. And it's not to say that I like didn't care what happened to anybody, but I
Hmm.
didn't feel the emotional punch in the moments when I think I was meant to. Did you get that from this?
I sadly did not. I did not either. I think that Journey was groundbreaking. As I said at the beginning of the pod, I did not finish Absu. I'm sorry. Like I did play it, and I did play it, before the podcast, and I said, well, this is why I didn't finish it. I felt like while there was some sort of movement with the swimming, I felt like it was a little tedious. Like I couldn't really hone
Mm,
down the controllers. So there's that. But in sort of the Sea's case, without going into spoilers of any kind, um, it's quite interesting because without saying which scenes, I believe that there's some sort of anime moments which kind of feel
yeah,
feel a
agreed.
little, again, a little contrasting, with this spiritual feeling, with this grand mountains and mausoleums and temples, and then you have these scenes that really do feel like straight out of an action anime. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I feel puzzled. I felt puzzled at times, like what does the game really want to make me feel? Does it want to make me feel cool? Because as I said in the beginning, you're jumping, you're doing tricks, and even the way, I will say that beyond the challenges, the way that your statue, your character moves, it's really trying to evoke that 90s cool feeling of being on a skateboard.
Hmm.
So you have that, and then you have that other feeling, which is sort of like, um, you know um, suspend your disbelief and look at this wonderful fictional places.
Yeah. I wonder if so this is a let me try to find the right metaphor for this. This is a double-edged sword, right?
Hmm.
So previous experience with a developer can kind of give you expectations for what their new game is going to be like, especially if it looks like the same type of thing. And so I wonder if that kind of misplaced expectations for what this would be. Whereas it's clear that it's like it feels like it has one foot in the past, but one foot in like trying new things, like a more traditional story arc and more gameplay mechanics, like we've talked about. I
Hmm.
wonder if that clashed up against expectations. Whereas like I keep expecting this to be, like you said, we expect this to be a more meditative type of experience when it's not all the time. Sometimes it feels like that, but it doesn't feel
Hmm.
like that all the time. But because they're trying new things, you do get some cool, like there are moments in this game that are much more hype than anything in a game of theirs that I've played in the past. And like there's some really cool set pieces and things like that that are much more action oriented than, like I said, I feel bad a little bit for comparing everything to the previous games I've played, but
Hmm.
that's the memories I bring to the things that I play. Nothing happens in a vacuum, I guess.
Hmm.
Those action sequences are cool. They just didn't hit me. It was a kind of surface level like, holy shit, look at this. And then when it's over, it's over. Um,
Mm.
I didn't come out of this with any kind of deep impact. And that includes what I think to be like, we'll talk about themes like in detail, but I just want to say like I think I have an idea of what they're trying to say with this game. And I
Mhm.
feel like I've played that story many times before. Like it didn't feel like it's breaking ground with what it's doing. And I don't think that every game has to break brand new ground on storytelling or themes, but
Mhm.
this didn't feel like it was not a very impactful exploration of it, we'll say. Like the moments are nice, the action set pieces are cool, and then I beat this game 5 days ago, maybe, and I've
Mhm.
already I've moved past it. Like it's a pleasant, but ultimately it's not something that's sticking with me.
Mm. I think that, and I think this goes to what I'm gonna say next. I think it's a very sensorial experience. That's
Yeah,
why it's not as emotional as you would have hoped. Because I wanted to mention, and it's interesting that I haven't mentioned it before, but the haptic feedback
it's
on the
good. Yeah.
controller is, I think it's one of the best implementations of the technology on the game, alongside, I don't know, Returnal. You can feel the sand, you can feel the
Mhm.
ice and the water, like that feeling with the controller, is really well recreated. So in
Mhm.
that sense, and it also uses, the little speaker that it has as well, but which
Yeah.
is a hit or miss for some. So
Always hit
I,
or miss, yeah.
so I will definitely say that it's a much more sensorial experience. That what happens with those experiences, like, they just make you want to be in the moment, but they don't really ask you to reflect beyond what you just experienced, which was, look at this cool, this cool stuff that you're seeing on screen. Not like,
Mm.
wow, this talks about the depth of humanity or whatever, right? Like, it's just kind of, as you said, surface level kind of a exploration of their themes.
You
Yeah.
know, I think that, like, I don't think that's the ceiling for this type of experience. I think that they can make a real impact, and I think that I like Journey did make that impact despite most of it being a sensory experience, an audiovisual experience, for me. And it has, Journey's one trick, that like really made an impact for me. But like there were moments in that game that made impacts, beyond figuring out what that trick was. And so that's to say, like this audiovisual centric experience doesn't have to just be a, like, okay, the moment was good, but it's not a long lasting type thing. It doesn't have to be that. That's not all it can be. That's what I felt sort of the sea was. And I wonder, is it because it's a little bit more straightforward in the plot? Is it
Hmm.
because they're pulling me out of the experience more often than Journey did? Is it because the theme feels like something we've explored before? Is a combination of all of those things. It feels like I've been like very, very critical of the experience, and I want to reiterate, like I said at the top, it's a pleasant experience. I
Hmm.
enjoyed those times when I was in that kind of meditative flow state in here, but it's just not one that's going to stick. And I wonder, like, did the new ideas just not hit the way that were planned? And maybe it's me more than most people. I
Hmm.
think this game was pretty highly regarded among critics and players. The Steam reviews are quite positive, and I
Yeah.
would I would still give this a positive review. It's just not something that really sticks.
I go back to what you mentioned about, critics not being as judgmental of indie games, and I think that we see that as well with sort of the sea. I saw reviews calling it, poetry in motion, calling it,
Mm,
a very, like, religious sensorial experience, and it's fun and all. But then you go and read, um, in depth at the reviews, and you can see that most of them actually do have some gripes with it. And then you go look at the score, and it's like an 8.5, which is, it's quite interesting. Like, it's
mm,
you and as a critic myself, you want it to do well. As the games that you showcase, you want them to be quite well. I
yeah.
just saw your Slay the Princess pod, and it didn't, like, it fell flat for you. The themes didn't connect with you, and I in this case I very much agree with you,
Hmm.
because it's a very cool experience. As you said, 2.5 hours, 3 hour experience. That you mentioned Journey, and I do not remember the game Journey taking me out of the experience for, like, this sort of side quest at all. So I think
Yeah.
that made it way more effective, and probably that could have made sort of the scene more effective, because it
Hmm.
it it takes away. And I think that, since you mentioned that um, more descriptively, I connected with that as well. I do think that the game could have could have done away with those things and still would have been a great experience.
Hmm.
And not
Yeah.
to inflate the playthrough, sorry, the playtime. Yeah.
Hmm. It's interesting you mentioned like the indie bump, because I think that for anyone who loves indie games, you want them to do well and you want them to be good, because they're
Mm,
often exploring things that are unique. And you play 10 indie games and have 10 completely unique experiences, which is like
hmm
not always the case with triple A's. Even really good ones, they feel like you've kind of played that game before a lot of times. And I think that there's a little bit of like weight in both directions. You know, triple A's get punished a little bit more, and indies are given a little bit more benefit of the doubt,
hmm
which is like there's a lot of human elements going into all of that. I think Sword of the Sea feels like one of those games where my inclination would be to score it lower. If I gave number scores, my inclination would be to score it lower than the score I would want to give it. Because,
hmm
and I've already said, like, I've given a lot of criticism about why I don't think this game reaches high heights as often as I feel like it should. It just feels like it trips over itself too often with these extra
hmm
things that have been added in. But I do think that it's a really nice like experience a lot of times too, when they're not pulling you out of it to put you in a half pipe to do like frankly like the tricks and stuff like this. It would be bad in like the PlayStation era for a snowboarding game. It would feel bad back then.
I think I was listening to the director of Promise Masquerade Agency, a game that is, I don't know if you've played it, but Promise Masquerade
Mm-hmm.
Agency is a game where you manage, right, this kind of Yakuza type of minigame. You manage mascots, right, in an agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the bulk of the game, and there's some narrative elements, but the bulk of the game is you driving around in a small truck, right? And I
Yeah.
believe that the developers were almost done with the game, and then they went over to the to the publishers, to the investors, and they said, like, well, the game is good, but you know what, like, you need to add more stuff in the third act. You need to add more meaty gameplay content so that it can
Mm.
feel like a fuller game. So I give that example because it makes me think a lot about Sort of the Sea. Once you finish, I don't think this is like a spoiler at all. There's a new game plus, and there's some other stuff that you can do as well, but it also just feels like I once said, like tagged in, because it's just more in regards to like the tricks that you can do, more in regards to the score of like pulling several tricks in a row. Very much wanting to be like Tony Hawk, which is like a watered down version of it. And this is not
Mm-hmm.
a pun, like you said, because I know there's a lot of water in the game, but
Yeah.
but it's like I think it was a little maybe misguided, maybe other influences that they asked them to kind of like add this new area so that it doesn't feel like an even smaller experience that it already is. But I think that there's some beautiful games right before your eyes, a beautiful game that made me cry in an hour, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
there's games that and Roger, another beautiful indie game that was just an hour long. So I think that um because it's like this third person adventure, so to speak, I think that they were sort of asked, because the expectations of people, I also think, that are very high when it's a third person adventure game like that.
Mm.
It's because of the current state of the industry. I think that it cannot just be one narrative experience, one and done, as they say. I think
Yeah.
that they want to add the skate park, add the currency, add like these little things that the game could have easily done without, and still be an impactful or even more impactful story.
Yeah. I think that if they had the motivation to like make movement more a part of the experience, make speed more a part of the experience, then like I think that was a good idea for this type of game that can add a lot. A sense of speed as you're
hmm
taking in the art and music can add a lot to an experience. And then it just feels like they took that one step too far by making you do other stuff that's not that sense of speed and that sense of flow. I understand the impulse, and even if it's not responding to criticisms of games that are quote gameplay light, even if it was just stemming from the idea of adding more speed and movement, I get it.
Hmm.
I understand why, and it's successful a lot of the time. But it's the game asks you too many times to do things that are not that, and those are not additive to this. So I
Hmm.
think that that's why this tops out at like pleasant, but ultimately not a game that I'll think about in 3 months.
Yeah, I think that, and I think this is a very harsh criticism, saying like it's a one trick pony, because it's not. Like I've heard, like the game does some new things, and in regards to what Journey, Pathless, and Absu did. But at the same time, Matt Nava did say that he is always very heavily influenced in the previous games that he has made. So
Hmm.
maybe, I mean, I'm not a game developer, so like I could be out of my depth, but maybe breaking away a little bit into what their core concepts are, and trying something maybe not completely new, because by this point they're tied to atmospheric, meditative, video games. But
Mm.
try to get like a middle ground between both, I think.
They do hit that middle ground often, but a lot of stuff that takes you out of it. Yeah. So, one more question for you, I guess, before we wrap up the non spoiler part of this. Did you feel compelled by the game's story, by developing themes as you're going through? There's lore notes to read. Did
Hmm.
you find yourself wanting to put those puzzle pieces together and things like that?
Not really. I thought that they seemed, of course, there's an overarching narrative, but I felt like they were more like haiku poetry, kind of, um,
Mm,
the way they were structured. So I found it somewhat compelling, but in their singular way, not as an overarching plot that I would be writing down or thinking like, oh, so this civilization did this, blah blah blah, right? I wasn't really that
hmm.
moved by it, I suppose.
Yeah. I think I had a little bit more fun, like thinking about how things connect and how like the history of the world connects,
Hmm.
but ultimately was not. I wasn't really moved or super satisfied by it. It ended up just being like kind of neat to read these and see what's going on with this antagonistic force that comes up. You read a little bit about its history and things like that. You think about how does that connect with what I've already read about the story? How does that connect with what I believe to be major themes of the story? Kind of interesting, but it's still not a game where I'm gonna come out of this being like the story really hit me. It was like flavor,
Hmm.
and flavor's fine. Like there's a lot of games that just have flavor story to give you a little bit of context for like, okay, so I'm in this ancient city. What is this place? And this game does give you that context. Um, just not in a way that made me like deeply, deeply care about it or really want to connect everything. It's not really a criticism of it, but it always has the potential to be a thing that can uplift a game that's light in other areas. And that's just a light area in this game, too. Despite, you know, this game, unlike other games that they've made, has text for you to read
Yeah.
about the history of the world and stuff like that. But it never, for me, never went beyond just like a nice, interesting flavor, which again is fine, but that's all it went to.
Yeah, going back again, I think that what I take the most, and that might make me sound a little shallow, but I think it just goes back to that feeling of rushing through the areas. I think that's what I take the most, the landscapes, right? If you share pictures of the game, people will instantly be surprised. And there's a photo mode, which not a lot of games launch with a photo mode, and because they knew that these environments were so beautiful, so striking, that of course they had
Hmm.
to add a mode. So that's what I take with me. As you said, like those are little quirks, little the totems, the little lore that is added there. It's interesting, because they talk about the fight between lava and water, and
Hmm.
it's the duality of things, which is interesting, but it doesn't like, there's games that like you listen to a dialogue, or you listen it, like you read a like a I don't know, a manuscript, For example, I quite like the manuscripts in Alan Wake, right? So you take the time to read it, and you're like, well, this was a neat piece of writing that
Hmm.
maybe sometimes it adds a little bit to the lore, maybe sometimes it's a little bit self-serving, but I didn't feel like I wasted my time, you know. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that I wasted it in here, but I also felt like, yeah, I mean, of course they're talking about you know, a long lost civilization, but it's and in that sense, I think it's fine that it doesn't go in too deep into talking about, like, you know, their costumes and laws, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I don't I don't wish they were longer for sure. Like I don't want to stop the boarding to read like a 5-page history of this zone or something like that. So
Yeah.
um I think that like it's a nice little hit of like lore, history, flavor, and then you move on. And you can connect them in a way. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. I guess to like wrap up here,
Hmm.
to kind of like sum up thoughts and give our recommendations per usual. I I still like, despite it feels like this episode so far has skewed more on the negative side, and that doesn't really accurately reflect how I felt about the game overall. Like I felt like this is a nice experience. But when I sit back and I think about like these things that were added for this, did they make the game better? And I don't think that they did. And it's a shame because you see the trailers of like, you know, surfing through the desert at high speed, and you have you have Austin Wintory's soundtrack, and you have this beautiful art and stuff like that. The things that you can count on are as good as they've been before. And then the things that are new that kind of would pique your interest in that trailer, I don't think I just don't think that adding more involved like skate mechanics worked. I don't think that it added to the experience. So it's not like I wouldn't recommend the game because it's short and you can still get that nice audiovisual meditative experience out of it. There is nothing quite like you said, the music is coming in with a new song as you're approaching a new zone, and you see this new area open up in front of you, and then you zoom out into it with this new song going, and it's
Hmm.
beautiful. These are great moments that it has. And then it's like, okay, now it's time to platform, bounce up these jellyfish and light up these lanterns and do this, you know, more involved gameplay stuff. And I just don't think that it ends up enhancing anything. So
Hmm.
we end up with a game where I'm like, if you loved Giant Squid's previous games, you'll probably like this. Like, it's not a bad game. You'll probably like it. But it's a little bit more. I could be up here saying like, and all the skating stuff. It's like really sweet. It's kinetic. It's awesome. It feels great, and it doesn't. That's not where I land with this. So, how
Hmm.
about you? What's your recommendation looking like?
I definitely do recommend it. I think that there is a sense of wonder that the game does achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, there's you mentioned a couple of moments ago. You mentioned that like the fish are just floating and you don't ask why. I think that
Yeah.
that it's important to have that suspension of disbelief, and I'm, you know, I'm happy that you mentioned it because it's true. You know, for, you know, for whoever's listening, and you know, us as varied video gamers, like we sometimes don't question these kinds of things. We just go along with it. And I think
Yeah.
that, you know, for, I don't know, for a more starry-eyed younger audience, maybe if they play this for the first time without having that expectation of Journey and
Maybe.
apps were pathless, maybe they will be completely awestruck by the game. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think that like as we get older, there is a sense of you know, we lose that sense of wonder. So I
Yeah.
think that, I don't know, a younger audience might really love it. As it stands, I liked it. There are some late game set pieces that really blew me away. That I was like, wow, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
cool. As I
Very
said,
cool stuff.
some anime moments. when there's some clashing and stuff. And again, I wasn't particularly moved because the characters don't even have names. They're just like kind of silhouettes or things that you can kind of relate them to stuff that you have seen before and other pieces of media. So that's fun. But maybe that's why it's not like an old timer, right? Or
Hmm.
a good, not great, because it's an amalgamation of really cool situations with some drawbacks, as we've mentioned, that just end up being somewhat forgettable by the end because they're so quick as well. It's the game ends really quickly too.
Yeah. Like forgettable is a harsh word, but I think it's the right word.
Hmm.
And I don't mean it in like the harshest way of like, this game has nothing to offer. It is therefore forgettable. It's
Yeah.
just, it doesn't make an impact. It didn't make an impact for me, personally.
Hmm.
And like the meditative audiovisual experiential game is a worthwhile type of game. I don't
Hmm.
think that that's something that's like a stepping stone up to a better game. And this
Hmm.
sort of the sea kind of feels like they tried to evolve it in a way that didn't work for me.
Hmm.
Whereas the simpler version to me is actually the better version of this game, the more resonant version of this.
Hmm.
Spend more time in that flow state and less time being like it shouldn't be too this hard to do a 360 grab trick on the board, you know. It may be, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm beginning to get in that zone where I'm talking in circles. So let's end it right there. We have a spoiler section to dive into more of it, but before we get there, we do our housekeeping per usual, and we always start with the guest. So, as I said at the top of the show, Andres, very busy, a lot of stuff, writing about games, streaming games. What's the other thing? Oh, the podcast. Yeah, the Little Victories podcast. Podcasting, you're doing it all. So tell people about what you do and where they can find it.
Indeed, I do, and it is very, very enjoyable. I really
Yeah.
love, doing all of this. I was, as I said at the beginning, very like elated to talk with you because something that Blue Sky has done for me is, I think that I got on social media on Twitter with the intent of finding a gaming community in late 2020 in September,
Mm.
just before I had my PS5, and then for a year I was tweeting to no one, and then slowly but surely I started getting a bit of a following. And then in 2023, I always whenever I finish a game, I post this sort of mini reviews of my general thoughts about the game, about the themes or the gameplay, or
Mm-hmm.
what moved me about the game. So in 2023, some guy reaches out to me and I start writing, to write longer format reviews. And that's when it started in 20, like all 2023. I reviewed a bunch of games,
Mm-hmm.
most of them good. Obviously I was more well known as an indie reviewer because the gaming outlet is not like that big. Sometimes I would get a couple of big games like the Outer Worlds, which that was the Spacer's
Mm.
Choice edition, so that was fun. But in general, mostly indie games, and I loved them. I loved,
Yeah.
like Viewfinder. I remember was one of the big ones that I got to review then. And then I had a podcast in 2024, but that was tied to my previous outlet. So I left that last December, and this January, when I made the move to Blue Sky, like many other people did, I found you.
Mm-hmm.
I found No Small Games. I found Underplayed. I found so many great
Yeah.
content creators and podcasts and streamers. So I said, well, I want to stream as well, right? I think that having a podcast is awesome, but also having like a longer format where you're just talking in a more relaxed way, right? While you're
Mm-hmm.
playing the game in real time. I think
Yeah.
that's like a good way to approach and to enhance, your experience as a critic. And finally, you mentioned the Little Victories podcast, which I am deeply, deeply grateful for. By the
Mm-hmm.
time this comes out, probably my latest will have been the podcast of the Nightling. I talked with the developer of the Nightling. They're from the Netherlands. Amazing little indie open world that takes big swings, and I always appreciate that. As we've been mentioning
Mm-hmm.
in this podcast, that we take no pleasure, right, in bashing an indie game. because like we did a little bit with Sword of the Sea, but it's a fantastic game in some instances, right? Like with a caveat. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always interesting to talk about the concept, the quirks of development, and all of these little things when I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
with developers. But yeah, that's basically me.
Well, you're doing a lot of good stuff. And one of the reasons I invited you on the show is I love your voice and what you're adding to our community. So I really think that you're doing good stuff. Especially like, I get on the show. It's funny you mentioned wanting a longer format than a podcast. I can't, on my podcast, I can't imagine. I just finished editing a 3-hour episode today. But having different places to do different things, right? You have your criticism angle, you have your more laid back Twitch streams, and then you have your chats with the developers on the podcast, Little Victories. So to be able to get all those different angles, and I think that your voice in those different situations is valuable for our community. So I think you're doing good work. I'll put links down in the show notes so people can easily find what you're doing. And like I said at the top, glad to have you part of the Tales from the Backlog Hall of Fame. Yeah, Hall of Fame. Everyone's in the Hall of Fame
Thank
now.
you.
So yeah, good stuff. So I did my plugs at the top of the show. The last one I didn't mention yet is the Discord server. So if you'd like to jump in and join a community, we got a pretty big group in there now. Still within like manageable communities, but we have a large group. We're pretty active in there. We have an invite link in the show notes if anyone would like to join us. So we'd love to have you there. Friendly group of people. With that being said, we are going to take our spoiler break. I'm going to say thank you to the patrons, and then when we come back, it will be full spoiler time for Sword of the Sea. All right, before we get to full spoiler time for Sword of the Sea, I've got some announcements. I've been a busy boy, and the customary thank yous per usual. So, as with all of November and December, I am on the Geeks and Grounds podcast as we're finishing up our walkthrough and analysis of Final Fantasy X. By the time this episode hits the public feed, the final episode for that will be out. You can listen to us talk about the second half of Final Fantasy X. I'm also on Pixel Project Radio as we go through a series walking through and analyzing Nier Automata. The first episode is out, the second episode will be out soon. If you'd like to play along with us or follow along, please check out Pixel Project Radio for a very meaty discussion about a game with a lot to talk about. And over on the Retro Hangover podcast, the King of Games 1999 tournament is coming to its end. We are about to get to the finals. The most recent semifinal match is out. You can listen to it now. It pitted Sonic Adventure versus Soul Calibur. So if you want to know what game advanced and find out which game is crowned the King of Games 1999, go check out the Retro Hangover podcast. With that being said, I'd like to say thank you, as always, to the patrons who help support the show and support the work that I do. A big hearty thank you and shout out goes out to Chris Nelson, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Fakori, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, Stefan, Drellish, Rigamort, Silcanet, Levi, John E., Aliasi, Joseph Hooper, Yorkie Duval, Aaron, Squill, Alan Kress, Doug T., Retro Overdrive, One of Many Tots, Magic Crow, Tom Danks, and many more. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot, and it truly helps me out in a lot of different ways. So thank you, and if anyone out there would like to join them, you can do so at patreon.com/realdavejackson. Now, with that being said, it is time to get back to full spoiler time for Sword of the Sea. All right, we're back. It's full spoiler time for Sword of the Sea. And 2 disclaimers. I usually do 1. Today you get 1, you get 2 for the price of 1. First one is the normal one. We're not going to go on a linear walk through the game. So if for some reason you're halfway through the game and you don't want to know what happens at the end, go finish the game. We might spoil it very quickly. And then the other thing is, I don't want people to expect a, here's the definitive, what is Sword of the Sea about? Here's the definitive, we're putting the puzzle pieces together type of thing. If you're new to my show, that's almost never what I do. But especially in a game like this that can feel kind of abstract sometimes, more experiential than trying to nail down hard details. At least that's what I got from this. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the Sword of the Sea story. So with that being said, I just wanted to start the non-spoiler section with that thing that we've said we were going to get to. We're getting to it. What do we think this game is about? Kind of top level, like, what is the theme of the game or themes of the game that we can pin down? What do these kind of moving pieces in the story, maybe your character, your friend that shows up, the fire serpent, the gods that are mentioned, what do they represent to us? So I'll throw to you first. What do you think? What's your takeaway?
Right. So, and you did allude to that in the previous section about the game actually telling a story that we have seen many times before, if that is where our theories are, if our theories are right, because it's, a long lost civilization that has that tried, at least I believe, to defeat a god of destruction of some sorts, a serpent god, right? That I had to Google, because there's a lot of serpent gods in mythology. So you get that, you get the spirituality that they were sort of trying to avoid the apocalypse, an apocalypse of some sort that they did not succeed in, and that's why the nature, or whoever this being kind of revives you as this statue, as a soldier, and it's up to you to bring the world back to life. So
it
broad
feels
strokes.
like right, broad strokes. It feels like because the game begins with a single drop of water, like the only drop of water, all the water in this area pooled into one little droplet that falls onto your character. And then knowing what we know about the story, it feels like this is like nature's last chance to live again, is to revive this statue, and then the statue to go around and bring water and bring life back to the world. So you mentioned that kind of apocalypse. I do have what I think are the details about that. We have kind of 3 factions in the backstory. We have a war between 2 of them, the forces of the ocean and the forces of fire. They are fighting basically for like the future of the planet, basically. The forces of the ocean lost, and the forces of fire won. So all the water dries up, all the life goes away, basically. The only life that we see in the game is either brought forth by water or is mechanical life, like the fire serpent that we fight at the end of the game. The third faction are the gods, who were around while this war was happening, but didn't intervene in this, really. They were not concerned with the sake of the world. They were concerned with immortality for themselves. And their fight for immortality did not work either, and so they're gone. That ancient city that we inhabit, the lore note in there basically says this is supposed to be where gods go after they die to like live in a retirement, or like a heaven for gods or something, or Valhalla for gods or something like that. But it's empty, because they were basically like, this is not good enough. We want immortality. So we have the 2 forces fighting for the sake of the planet, and you would think like the one faction that could like maybe sway things in favor of something good, not interested in the fight at all. They just want immortality for themselves. And to me, I mean, this feels like a very obvious like climate change type of story to me, or analog, the way
Mhm.
that I would read this, as the forces of fire, you know, global warming and all of those
Right.
forces versus nature. Nature's fighting to persist and survive. And in this case, I would think the humans are the gods who, or specifically the people who could make decisions to help in the fight against global warming, the people who
Mhm.
could make large scale decisions to fight for, you know, for the planet against global warming,
Uh-huh.
choosing not to in order to seek immortality for themselves, in order to seek riches for themselves.
Okay.
And in this version of the story, that doesn't work. Whatever you think you're able to get for yourself, it is nothing compared to the scale of the planet, the life on the planet, which is
Mhm.
what I kind of took away from this. There's another faction in the history, those big statues that you climb up in the frozen area.
Mhm.
There's a lore note that says that they too fought for immortality in the past and failed. So, not learning from history, not learning from past mistakes, basically.
Mhm.
That is the takeaway that I take away from this. I mean, like, it would be hard for me to think of something else when the goal of the game is to bring water and life back to a dead planet, basically, a dead world, a world with no life or very little life. The only thing that survives are these, I think, like, the serpent is not alive. It is a creation. You, the character you play as, you feel like a creation. You're a statue. Were you alive someday? I don't know. The only one that looks alive is the other like character that shows up. That like,
Mhm.
that's the other character in the game. Everything else feels artificial. Everything that was living and natural is dead. You're bringing it back to life. Maybe it's, this is media analysis like for dummies basically,
Uh-huh.
but that's what this feels like to me.
No, I mean it's totally understandable and relatable. And once you connect the dots with those ideas that you just mentioned, I think it makes absolute sense. I mean, it's clear. I've seen that in a couple of games recently, and the way that they handle it, it's sometimes very ham-fisted, and in others they take a lighter approach. But it is true. I think that there is a lot of duality intrinsically tied to the game. There's, I don't know, I think I saw the two main characters, right? It's you and then the antagonist. Eventually you get to ride like the dolphin and then the shark.
Mm-hmm.
The battle between the water and fire. So I think that the the structure of the game is also very very tied to that. You have just two factions, like some sort of yin and yang thing going on, which
Mm-hmm.
is just like the game itself, minimalistic enough to have a story and to have an arc and to have something to say, but again, not overwhelming the player with too much of what is conceived in the world.
Yeah. I think that environmentalist type of stories are getting more and more common. I mean, they've always been common, but I feel like this is a common thing now, as we're recording this in early October and it's 80 fucking degrees out where I live, where it shouldn't be 80 degrees outside. These are
Right.
more pressing and it's more on our mind now. The value of what we're losing, um, and the value of what, if we continue on this pace or if it gets worse, the value of what's not going to be there in, a couple generations. I think that these types of stories become closer to our mind, whether it's on the side of creators making art about it, or if it's on the side of players, or people who are taking in any kind of art. Players in this case, playing Sword of the Sea, and being like, well, look at this world. Look at this creek in my hometown that doesn't have water anymore that it used to, and
Hmm.
wishing that it used to be the way that it was. I think that it's just easier to bring that kind of interpretation to it. And it feels like an obvious interpretation to me, but that's That's
Mm-hmm.
how art is, and art interpretation is. What's obvious to me is not obvious to everybody else. So that's just what I took away from it. And admittedly, playing Abzu before this, which is all about like the beauty and majesty of the ocean, to
Mm-hmm.
me, another precious thing that we're losing, some of that beauty and some of that majesty little by little as we go.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of colors, I come into this game and we have ocean things again. We're rescuing the most recognizable sea creatures from petrification and
Extinction, yeah.
extinction, basically. Like I don't remember like how you find all of the animals, but you do rescue a big dolphin, a big shark, a big sea turtle, a big blue whale, the faces of ocean life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all in a horrible state when you get there and you're trying to bring things back. So that's just kind of like what it feels like is like the central idea here. But I think that we can map ourselves and then our own real world onto characters and factions in the game's like backstory here. And I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, I think that the environmental message is pretty clear. I was looking at the trophy list, and there are
Mm,
so many animals that you can ride alongside.
yeah.
Beyond, as I said, the dolphin and the shark. There's turtles, there's other types of whales, and they have their
Mm-hmm.
names on it. So it's maybe a way to, beyond, of course, bringing water into this desolate landscape, to actually make you more conscious about, your surroundings. I think that in that
Mm-hmm.
um
Oh, you mean like full
uh
names, like the scientific names?
yes, yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
that's cool.
not the scientific name, but
Oh,
like,
okay.
I don't know, the dude, because I did see a like a whale that's called a sperm whale, something that I never
Mm-hmm.
heard of that name. So I was like, well, okay, so that's the name of it. So
Yeah.
there was some sort of investigation, natural investigation into putting them into the game. So
Right.
obviously that must mean a movement towards conservatism as well, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
of conservation of these species,
Yeah.
which
I mean,
is
the world
clear.
of Sword of the Sea is undoubtedly better with these creatures in them,
Hmm.
thriving, living, and not to mention all the plant life that you bring back and stuff like that. So, yeah, as you said, pretty obvious like core message, and then you can build
Hmm.
stuff around that for sure. Let's talk about. So I'm going to try to guess those anime moments that you mentioned earlier in the show.
Go on, yeah.
The first one, at least the first one that jumps to my mind before the final one, of course, is there's a point in the game where you're in this lava area after your friend, the other character that you've been cooperating with, has been swallowed by this fire serpent. It's kind of like the devil of this world in a way. And
Hmm.
you're trying to help. You're going through this lava zone, and it's like a chase sequence, and the platforms are disappearing underneath you as you're trying to move through it. And it's an unwinnable thing. You'll fall in the lava eventually as the platforms just all disappear, and your character's like slowly sinks into the lava and then sinks below the lava into like this, I don't know, like this abyssal primordial sea type of thing.
Yeah.
And you're like petrified as you sink down. And first of all, am I right? Is this an anime moment?
There are several. Yeah,
Oh
that
yeah.
is one of them. I like, I mean, you've seen it 1,000 times before, right? When the protagonist is defeated, and there's like that voice in their head that is like saying to them,
Yeah.
like, don't give up, get back up into the game, you will defeat them.
Yeah.
This sort of which without any dialogue, but you can see that it's that way of the game, kind of as you said, hype moment where get back in the game.
Yeah. At a low point for your character, if you think of this as like a hero's journey type of tale, where
Mm.
you're at a low point, and in this version of it, you're sinking down into this, like, it's almost like an afterlife of sorts. If you think of the afterlife as sinking down, 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 down,
Hmm.
and you're petrified, and a little fish. I tried to figure out what kind of fish it is. Looks like a tang to me. Might be right, might be wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Comes up and kind of like nibbles at your finger, and that breathes life back into you, almost like nature through one of its smallest forms, saying like, don't give up, you got to get back out there. And so you go back
Uh-huh.
up, and this turns into this like run, like an endless runner type of thing up the side of this giant tower that you're making your way toward, which is definitely like, I've seen that before. I don't even watch a lot of anime, but I've seen someone run up the side of a tower or the side of a building like that before.
Yeah.
You're like dodging out of the way of stuff as you're trying to get back to this serpent.
Yeah, and me either. I really don't watch like that much anime. Maybe when I was younger, Dragon Ball, and Naruto, maybe, or many others. And I think that it was quite exciting in a way to start like propping you up for that final encounter with the boss, right? Like
Yeah.
fighting. Again, we mentioned, don't ask the game to for too much sense, because maybe there's not a lot there, but like surfing all the way almost to the moon, which is like where
Hmm.
the game kind of takes you, at least for a moment, right, to space, literally. I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that is like an exciting moment, that I think that the third act always has to be this bombastic situation where you're really invested, and there's fireworks going on and everything. So I think that in that sense, um again, when the game ended, it just ended for me. I didn't really, narratively speaking, of course, you see coming when the character, your statue, and the other character who is first presented as your antagonist, and then you become friends, and then you both ride the blade together, which I found that
Yep.
pretty cool.
Hmm.
um I feel like that was one of the least, like one of the only efforts in characterization, which I liked, which I would have liked to do a little bit longer. But I don't know if they had a deadline that they just, which it's they accomplished what they wanted to do with the set piece, in the end.
Hmm.
But I also feel like it just ran credits, like just when I was starting to get a little bit more invested in the
Mm.
world.
I think they try to do a lot with a little as far as characterization. One notable thing about that other character is they have like human-like eyes,
Oh yeah.
which maybe you do under the mask. Your character never takes the mask off. The other one does, and they have like human-like eyes, and they have expressions that they make. But you quickly see, I think, once that other character figures out that you're on their side because you free the dolphin,
Hmm.
then they're like, okay, actually, you're cool. But like, they don't give you a lot to go on. Like, who was this person? Where are they from? Are they the same as you? You don't really know, and they never really tell you. So it's just like, it feels like, oh, you meet the other last surviving thing on the planet, and they think you're hostile at first, then you're not, and they're like, all right, you're cool, hop on, and you go through, and then this is where like that more traditional plot comes in, where it's like you get separated from them and you try and find your way back, and then the serpent eats them at one point and you need to go rescue them, which all feels like, yeah, I want to go rescue them, but I'm not, like, I
Hmm.
don't feel it in my soul that I have to go rescue them the way that I do feel that when I'm compelled by characters in games. I
Hmm.
feel in my soul I have to go rescue. I'm not going to spoil another game because I got yelled at for the Expedition 33 episode for doing that. So I'm not going to do it here. Um, so
Yeah.
with that being said, part of that hype moment when you're running up the tower also is because you have a new sword, because your sword got broken
Oh yeah.
before that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like you said, with we're not asking questions here. The sword is formed out of a pillar of blue light. What is it? Don't ask questions. You reach into the blue light, you grab it, and a new sword forms, and you hop on it, and you're off up the tower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the last set piece is awesome, where you're on this, you're in this like half pipe of water, and the serpent's chasing you, and you have to collect. I think you're like collecting clouds basically to send a water ball back
Mm-hmm.
at it. We're
Yes.
at like a revival of the conflict between water and fire, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that. You have to do it a bunch of times as you dodge like lasers from the final boss. It's cool. It's not hard. Like I feel like I should have gotten hit a bunch of times by the lasers and never did. It makes me wonder like, is this actually like a challenge, or is it a playable cutscene, in a way?
Mm.
The last part where you're riding on the dolphin and then the shark
Yeah.
swimming toward the serpent, chasing after it. Because after you hit it with enough water balls, it starts to run and you chase it down through a cylinder of water now. And you send like a water ball spell. It hits it
Yes.
back at you as a fireball. You hit it back. It's like, a Zelda type thing. But
Yeah.
it always like it freezes right before you're supposed to hit the button to hit it back and gives you the prompts like press X or press square, whatever it is,
Yeah.
to interact with stuff. So it makes me wonder, like, it feels like a playable cutscene. It's really cool visually. It's awesome. The music is great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't need it to be super involved, but it feels like it's a scripted thing. Like you can't lose. I don't know. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned Zelda because I did write down that there were some sequences that reminded me a lot of Ocarina of Time. I remember
Mm-hmm.
the in the ice level, you have to follow the direction of some statues where some statues are pointing. So that reminded
Yes.
me of the haunted wasteland, right? Or in the desert
Yep.
temple in Ocarina of Time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lava sections as well, being, I mean, many other games have that as well. And then finally that back and forth, that sort of ping pong that you had that with, in the Legend of Zelda as well. As you said, I don't want to spoil anything that I don't need to, but there's something similar to that in Ocarina of Time, like that type of gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I mean, did they play this game or am I just imagining things, right? But I remember, I go back to Sonic Adventure. I remember you mentioned Sonic. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, there's this fights, right? This final boss fights that are also very majestic. Like you're fighting in well, in the second one, you're fighting in space as well, actually. So yeah, so it's like they kind of evoke that feeling, but there's no challenge. I don't think that you were made to lose that at any moment.
Yeah.
When you're going through that cylinder that you mentioned the first time before the the dolphin and the shark appear, there's some like fire walls that you really need to evade. So
Mm-hmm.
that is interesting. I was hit by one of them, but in general, if you are really invested, if you're really focused on the game, I don't think you would have any sort of complications with it to pull it off and get it all the way through to the end.
Yeah. I think that this like set piece looks cool enough that it's still cool. I wish they would have not frozen the game and put up a prompt every single time to bounce that spell back, because it
Hmm.
it takes you out of the moment. Just make it easy. Like just give me a huge margin for error to bounce it back. I've made it to the end of the game. Like I think you can trust me to time pressing square, once every 10 seconds as they bounce the ball back and forth. Feels
Yeah.
odd to me. Like hide the fact that it's a playable cutscene if it's a playable cutscene. Like, just give me a huge margin for error. I think it would have kept me in that a little bit more. As it stands, it looks really cool, and I still think it's like a nice, big way to end the game, to end this big confrontation with
Hmm.
the fire serpent. But yeah, it just feels like another one of those things where it's like we added in this gameplay thing, but like I don't know, like do you not trust the players to be able to do it without you literally freezing the game and giving me a QTE to do it? I don't know. So,
Yeah, I think it all goes back to the beginning, right? To that unparalleled feeling of exhilarating speed.
mhm,
That, going back, that game really nailed it. And I think that, as you said, maybe it's because critics, have that bias towards indies. Maybe that's why it scored so well, because that is what carries the whole game. And when you're
mm,
taken away from that, when you are in this very scripted, as you said, like almost cutscenes that make you need to like move very little, and there's not really much of a challenge there. I think it's, I mean, not offensive. I mean, it's just a game in the end. But as you said, like it would be way more rewarding if, as I don't know, the Souls games do. You're playing what's Dark Souls 2, right? Like what those games do is sort of give you an enemy that has some semblance of attacks that the boss of that area has that same attack. So it's kind of teaching you what to
mm,
expect at the end of that sequence. So a
mm,
great game, if it needs to have a sort of challenge, I think that a great game should have like to teach you, and that would be like your final test, your final exam,
mm.
and be rewarding in that sense. But because the only thing that, or well, the most important thing that sort of the sea has going for it is that sense of speed, I think that's why it stumbles in that third act.
I think it's just another one of those moments that takes me out of that flow state where I think they would have been better served to just give you a big margin for error, but like nothing took me out of it more than the game literally stopping for it to say press square to bounce
Yeah.
the thing back. It just feels odd to me. And it does take a little bit away from what is a cool ending, but could have been like exhilarating. So,
Hmm.
I guess it's a pattern of decisions that take away from those moments that could be really, really exhilarating. Um,
Hmm.
so you defeat the fire serpent. It freezes up. It falls down below. And then the end result of this is your character folds their arms across their chests. The light in their eyes goes out, and you become what looks like a ball of water that shoots up in the air and kind of seeds the sky. And
Hmm.
rain falls, and you've succeeded. You've brought water back to the world. And like, those desert areas, they may not have always been desert. They may have been ocean at some point. And you kind of see that as your friend character is surfing down the side of the tower as the credits roll and rain is falling. And as the credits go further and further, you can see you're moving toward an ocean down at the bottom. And that's the end of Sword of the Sea. You've succeeded. You've brought water back. And hopefully the soil can take it because the desert sands certainly probably can't. But that's something that we don't need to worry too much about. So that's the end. It's a nice ending. I like the credits sequence of the character surfing down the tower as the water is falling. You're left to kind of think about what you've done. Maybe in one sitting. It's that type of game.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah. And New Game Plus, by the way, I didn't do this, but I did watch it. New Game
Hmm.
Plus adds a speedometer so you can see how fast you're going. 700 miles an hour as you're speeding through the desert, like on the shark or on the dolphin, like comically fast,
Uh-huh.
700 miles an hour, but pretty cool.
Yeah, it does really feel like that. Going back to, I think I alluded to this in the first part of the show. It hones in on those gamey aspects of the game. And again, I don't think that's where the game's strengths lie. It's
Hmm.
in again, in the speed, and in the awe-inspiring vistas. That's where the game's strengths lie. um and you mentioned the antagonist that then becomes your friend. I A lot of indie games do not have faces for their characters because they'll say that it's very hard to animate. So I
Right.
think it was very refreshing to see this character. I believe she's a female character,
Looks
to be
like it.
so expressive with her eyes. That sadly I was a little like, I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I feel so not let down, but not as moved as I could have been, because, you know, as you said, like your statue, your character kind of sacrifices themselves to save the world, and she's just left there, and that's the end of it.
Hmm.
Which I can't really feel bad for her, because maybe, as you said, if we're theorizing, maybe she's actually a human, right? She's not like a
Yeah.
wraith, like this statue that we played as, that really didn't have life. So maybe
We just don't
she.
know enough
Uh-huh.
to. I don't know enough to feel anything about characters in this game.
Hmm.
You can feel a sense of relief that you've fully brought water and rain back to the world at the end. And like that serpent, not good. That serpent had to go. So you rid the world of this evil force, but I can't feel anything more than that kind of like relief that
Yeah.
we have done it. We've brought the water back. So, and I think that might be part of the reason why, after this really, really hype sequence at the end, starting with your failure falling down the lava, your sword is broken. It's pretty much a straight shot up the
Hmm.
tower, two kind of like phases of a final boss fight, and then the ending. And it's really cool. But I
Hmm.
found myself watching the credits and just kind of chilling, listening to the music, watching the character go down, reading the names, but not like feeling anything
Hmm.
super impactful.
Yeah, I think that beautiful landscapes can only do so much, to move you. It's in a video game, I mean, right? Like, you can,
Uh-huh.
as a concept art, I like going through concept arts of games. They're, extremely talented people recreating, painstakingly recreating these areas that you
Mhm.
can rush through with the sword. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. It's pretty awesome. But
Mhm.
there has to be some personal stake for the character, at least for me, to feel very invested. And I think that something that could have gone a long way is, after the credits rolled, just some sort of cutscene of, this female character kind of, I don't know, interacting with the new life forms that have, come back from the death, or, kind of
Mm.
trying to tell you that, you did good or something, like kind of reassure the player that your mission has been accomplished in some way, because
Yeah.
it's sort of just, sorry, it's just in like inferred that you do
Yeah.
that.
You're just left to guess what comes next. But, it's hopeful. It's definitely hopeful.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, I think that about sums up Sword of the Sea. So thank you for coming on the show and having this conversation with me. Um, a little bit more conflicted than I think the both of us would have liked to have been, but hey, that's what we do. Sometimes that's what these things ask of us to just have an honest conversation. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, once again, thank you so much for inviting me. And again, I chose this game because I think it's a challenge. I usually, on my podcast or in, the conversations that I get invited to, I'm usually only able to talk about like a game for 5 to 10 minutes at most, right? When there's
Mm,
really sometimes a lot to say about many different kind of games. And
hmm.
your deep dives that you've made with all of these fantastic guests have been incredible. And I think this one was more of a challenge. And I'm really glad that we were able to speak for as long as we have,
Hmm.
to actually, tie or find, like in my case, find out about the more, heavy-handed environmental message and what the game did right. It was pretty great to talk about that, and also
Hmm.
where it stumbled and it could have been better. I mean, I think that there's nothing wrong with kind of exploring those themes as well, and I think that we
Yeah.
we did quite well. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was great having you here. I'll have you back on sometime for sure. And for now, I will give everyone who's still with us a reminder to check out Andres Plays on Twitch, on Blue Sky. Check out the Little Victories podcast, and probably follow on Blue Sky for critical work for writing and things like that as well. So links again are down in the show notes. So you can check all that great stuff out. And everyone who's still here, hey, you're my hero. I appreciate you. Tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
So Many Games is an independent video game website from a group of passionate people. With a team of over 10 writers doing their bit for game discoverability, you'll surely find a game that will pique your interest. Our reviews delve into the main elements of the game and how they made us feel. With unbased but fair critique and AI-free writing, we hope to offer you a safe place to find out if a game is worthy of your time. But we also write articles from Steam Next Fest catch-ups to topics of interest from the gaming world. And we also publish written interviews from developers to voice actors on our bid to shine some light on the people behind our favourite games. But that's not all, as we also offer a monthly podcast interviewing developers, artists, composers, voice actors, and anyone else we can think of to come and talk about their experiences of making their latest or not so latest projects in real time. With a fortnightly newsletter to go on top of our offerings, there really is something for everybody. So what are you waiting for? Get on over to somanygames.co.uk and see for yourself all the amazing content that we have waiting for you.
Hey, Nerf herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone?
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.